If you watch my videos in the past, you may know that there is a system for solitaire wargaming that I enjoy immensely. It simply has some of the best wargames, but let's face it, some of the best games that I ever played, or at least some of my favorite ones that you think are not necessarily the same, especially if you ask other people. To me, those are simply some of the best ones. This system is the leader system by DVG. We used to call it the air leader system because it was used to represent air warfare. Then there was an implementation about the submarines and naval warfare, and now we have a new chapter in that system, which is called Tiger Leader, and it is about land warfare. In this game, you, the solitaire player, are leading a group of German soldiers, infantry units, armor, different types of vehicles, artillery. You're leading a group of various elements of the German army against various enemies, and the game is set during the Second World War. So that's another interesting change here. Usually the games of the Air Leader series were set in modern times after the Second World War. There are some exceptions, especially some games that haven't been released in printed edition. They're in print and play. Some of those are set earlier. But now we have a big box with a lot of stuff in it, believe me, with a system that I love enormously, in a setting, historical setting that I also like a lot. The Second World War is my favorite setting for a historical war game. So best of both worlds. I can't tell you how excited I was to play this game. Let me show you how the game works. I'll try to give you a general coverage of the system and how it works here, so that the following segment can work both as an introduction to the system for those of you who may not know it yet, or sort of as an update for those who know the system, so they can see the different things that this game has to offer that differ from previous implementations in the system. To start the game, you need to first set up a campaign, and in order to do so, you need to choose a theater of operation from the ones that are available here. Each has a specific card. Suppose that we want to play a campaign set in the British North Africa 1942. Here we're told about the level of difficulty, the terrain that we will use, other conditions that may apply. This is used later to determine the leaders, the commanders that you receive. And here you have a bonus in the number of special operation points that you receive. Special operation points, SO points, are the currency that you use in this game to do almost everything. To declare specific attacks, we'll talk about this later, to purchase units, to purchase upgrades, to refit your units. A lot of stuff that you will do spending those, so make sure that you budget those points well. Once you have a theater of operation, you also need to decide what the heck you're gonna do there. There are several types of objectives that you may be trying to accomplish. You may choose one, you may draw one randomly, and that will further add details to your campaign. Suppose that we are performing a blitz in the British North Africa. Then these two cards determine the basic stats for our operation. The blitz adds the number of SO points that we start with, the duration of the campaign for weeks, which is sort of like macro turns. You will perform different missions on this tactical map here, and then at the end of each week you will have a chance to refit your units, spend SO points and things like that. Also, you gain new points week after week. This battalion points indicates the number of units of the enemy that you will have to face. There is a deck, actually there are 3 decks of battalion cards, one for supply, one for command, and one for assault units of the enemy, and you will draw cards from those decks looking at the battalion value that they have until you meet or exceed this number. This is how you will form the deck of enemy cards that you will have to face. More indications here about the type of thing that you're trying to achieve, possible limitations. Here, this is a blitz, so you need to achieve some success quickly. And then victory point level and evaluation. At the end of your campaign, you will look at this table here, and based on the number of victory points that you have earned at that point, you will know how you did. Now it is time to purchase your forces, and you will need to spend SO points to do so. There are a lot of different types of units, from light vehicles, infantry, mortar team, field guns, and of course a lot of tanks. This is Tiger Leader after all, a lot of different tanks. Units have designations telling you the years in which these units were in service and are available here. So if I'm playing a 1942 campaign, I cannot use this unit here that is only available for campaigns set in 93 to 95. So you select your units, you will want to have a little bit of everything, a mix of different things, or maybe you want to specialize in different things. But at the end you will have several cards representing the units that you will lead in combat. I'm just putting together a random mix of things here. Very random, basically just using cards that are falling from my hand. I do not even know if these are legal, if there is a set of units that would work. I'm talking about the chronology here. So you get your units here represented by cards, and you're spending SO points to purchase them. And as you can see, these units have indications here. They have numbers because each unit comes with a matching counter. For example, here I have a rifle team and I have a counter that says 912. Then it matches that one. The same applies to other vehicles, to other units, vehicles and everything, because that means that you will have a card in front of you telling you the stats of your unit, and then you will have a counter going on the map, on the tactical map, and you will use that to indicate the position of your unit on the battlefield, and you will use that for tactical resolution. But units also need to be led, and this is why you have several decks of commanders. Commanders specialize in a specific type of thing. They may be commanders for unarmored units, for armor, for infantry, and there is also a deck of commanders for artillery. Each unit that you purchased earlier using your SO points receives a commander of the corresponding type, and the level of quality of the commanders that you receive is based on the type of campaign that you're playing. So each campaign has a different mix of commanders. Commanders may be at different levels of experience, maybe recruits, green, average, skilled, veterans, or aces. And that is represented different levels of experience by the fact that the commanders are not represented by a single card with the stats, but by several cards, actually by 3 double-sided cards with different stats for the level of the commander. If I am hiring this commander at the recruit level, then I look at this side here. If I hire him or purchase him or upgrade him later at a higher level from recruit to green, then I use this one. And then you have the average, the skilled, the veteran, and the ace, of course, with increasingly good stats the more experienced the commander is. In any case, to summarize, when you will lead your units in combat, there will be a marker, token on the board indicating the position of the unit. Then you will have a corresponding set of 2 cards, one with the stats of the unit per se, and one with what is added by the commander. The commander must match the type of unit that you're leading, infantry with infantry, for example, but commanders are interchangeable as long as they are working within what they're good at doing. An armor leader can lead any armor unit. If there is a time when you want to retire a guy, or maybe you want to take we want to give this guy that's been very stressed a break, then you can use another commander to send to mission. So each time that you're sending out your units to the battlefield, you can reorganize the leaders and the units that they have. Almost there. As I said, you will have a deck of enemies represented by battalion cards, and each battalion card comes with an indication of what is the force represented by that battalion. For example, if I am fighting against a small armor force, I will have to fight 4 tank units, 4 half, 2 AT, and 2 armor cars. Against infantry, I have this. Battalions also have a designation here, which corresponds again to a marker, and this marker representing the enemy battalions goes on this other display here. For example, dismounted troops have a designation of 10A, and I take the corresponding marker and I place it here, and I place it in the front band. Basically, this is the operational display. See, we're zooming in from the strategic map, so to speak. You see the big picture. Then we're zooming into the operational. Your position as the Germans is abstracted to be here. You are in the German staging and the German transit. When you attack, you can attack the front or the transit or the rear or even the breakthrough area, but it costs SO points to do so. And the cards will tell you where you initially place your units. As the campaign progresses, the enemy units will probably move and try to attack you to move towards your area, so you have to try to keep them at bay a little bit. Alright, time to start the fight. You have your forces, you have an enemy battalion to fight. It is time to fight it. First, you set up the map depending on the terrain that you're using. There are 10 tiles, terrain tiles per terrain. Here I'm using the desert. You shuffle them together, you use 8 of them. You place them on the map with this triangle here facing the top. They all have one such triangle, and you form the map. You set up your units in the bottom row of the map. Enemy units will be set up in the 2 top row, and you determine the initial placement of each unit randomly, rolling a die. And remember, the mix of units that you are fighting is determined by the card that describes the battalion that you are fighting, and that battalion also may have specific rules, modifications, things like that. On your way to the battlefield, though, it is important to also remember that events may happen, so you draw an event card. Once the mission is over, you will also draw another event card, and event cards are self-explanatory stuff, bad stuff, good stuff that may happen to you, and you simply read the text and you perform the corresponding event for before the battle or after battle events, depends on the card that you draw and when you're resolving it. Now, the main idea, each battle will last 5 turns. There are ways of modifying that, but that is the standard duration. And if you look at the commanders that you have, they will have a speed designation. Most commanders are described as slow. Occasionally you will have a fast guy. There is a combat turn is divided in 3 phases. First, your fast commanders act, then the enemy units act, and then your slow commanders act. As you can see also, the speed of the commander, the reaction speed, the decision speed may change based on the level of stress. Commanders start a campaign at 0 points of stress, and then events will add stress to them. And when they go past a certain threshold, then they may become slow, and also other penalties apply. Here you have modifiers that the commander can lead to the commanded unit in combat based on range 0 or 1+. Then, as you can see, there is the range factor and also the stress factor that will determine what modifier the fighting unit will receive when commanded by that commander. So first your fast units act, or your fast commanders act, then the enemies, then you. For yourself, your units can move whenever it is that they move up to their speed, and they simply move to adjacent axes. For example, I decide to move my unit 022 by 1x. Done. After movement, you can attack. You can also choose not to move and to attack. And you have a range indicating how far you can attack. This unit can attack enemies at range 1, 2, or 3. It is not good in close combat, not in range 0. And it is exceedingly simple. When you roll an attack, you choose your target that is within range, and you also need to have line of sight. Certain types of terrain will block line of sight. You roll a die and you apply possible modifiers, such as, for example, certain units specialize attacking other units. For example, this one gets a +1 when attacking vehicles. Also, this unit receives a +1 die when stationary, not when moving. Because, as a standard thing, these units actually gain a die of bonus when they advance. So your modifiers that will modify the result of the roll, but also will modify the number of dice that you are rolling. So if you are advancing and you end the movement closer to an opponent, when you attack the opponent, usually you get an extra die to roll, this unit being the exception. Other units, such as this one, would receive an extra die if they move and they end the movement closer to the enemy, and then they attack, then they get that extra die. Also, if you are at range 0 and you're fighting against an enemy at range 0, you get an extra die. So you roll the corresponding number of dice. Modifiers may come from the commander that you're using, may also come from other situations, may also come from cover if you're firing against heavy cover or against light cover or heavy cover, then the opponent gets a defense die, a defense point, which is basically a negative point that you have to factor in. Also, the target may have a defense, which also is subtracted from the damage that you inflict, actually from the die roll. So positive modifiers may come from leaders, from moving, from being at range 0, negative modifiers from defense and cover. And at the end, you simply, after apply all the modifiers, need to match or exceed the attack number. This is also the target number. If after all is said and done in your attack, you roll the modified 7 against an opponent, you score a hit and the opponent is destroyed. When you hit an opponent, you simply remove the opponent from the board, and you're trying to remove as many as possible to weaken the enemy. The enemies, then after you use your fast commanders, get to act. Basically, they're also moving and attacking, but they may move in different ways. Here's the interesting thing. Here you have a table that regulates movement during this phase. The enemy tactical movement. Really neat. Here you have a table and you roll a die, and various types of modifiers may apply depending on the unit that you're fighting, the campaign, the overall situation. When you roll a die, you then mark the result on this table using this marker here. For example, suppose I rolled a modified 5, then I place that marker there. Let's see what happens here. The die that you rolled and you apply modifiers to indicates the line where you place this marker here. The line indicates 3 columns. So one tells you what the tank and half will do. The other one tells you what rifle units, anti-tank units, and machine gun units will do. And the other column will tell you what pretty much everybody else does. Truck, gun units, mortar units, and things like that. So there are different things that may happen. The corresponding unit may simply advance. It may advance only if it cannot attack. If it can attack from where the unit is sitting, then it will do that. Maybe it will advance to reach cover. Maybe it will move to an adjacent cover unit. Maybe it will retreat to try to reach a cover area. So that is what you do. You use that table to resolve the movement of the enemies. So the movement of the enemies is overall predictable in general. You can get a sense of what they will do, but it will still end up in different areas. This guy is reaching for cover. This guy is also reaching for cover. This guy is simply advancing. This guy is moving there, and so on and so forth. They will try to get to you. They're trying to attack you. They're moving towards the closest units as a general rule. So they move and then they attack. And when they're attacking, they also have a range value that indicates how far they can attack. They have, well, this is in the bottom is the defense value that counts against you when you're attacking them. And super important here, you have the target number. They roll dice, they can be modified exactly like yours, so you apply modifiers, and if the final result is equal to or higher than the number indicated here, the target is destroyed. And the peculiar thing is that their target number is the same for any type of target that you're attacking. Sure, there are other modifiers that may apply, but overall, the way of resolving combat, tank versus tank, infantry versus tanks, tanks versus infantry, is still the same, is always the same. Oh, and how about damage? What happens when they inflict damage on you? Then you draw a counter from this cup, and these counters are double-sided. One applies, oh, that's a good one, to armor. The other one applies to infantry. You simply draw a counter, you use the side that applies to the unit that is taking the damage, and you simply apply the effects. You place it on the unit. A commander may take stress, a commander may be wounded. There are a lot of possible effects. Explosion, let me tell you, this is bad. A unit is immobile. Commander is killed in action. Machine gun doesn't work anymore. It can be anything from your unit being eliminated in a single hit, to nothing happening, to certain abilities of your unit being temporarily inoperative. For example, maybe you cannot attack a close range or a long range now. The damage stays there. Later, you will have a chance of spending SO points to improve your unit, to repair units that are damaged. Your commanders will gain stress just from being in the battlefield and from stress factors that may come out of this cup. And this is how the game in general works. The great things of the leader system are here. In particular, the different perspectives and angles on the campaign are there, meaning the operational angle and the tactical angle. You have these battles which happen at the tactical level. They have a lot of detail. They have terrain included. In that sense, they reminded me of Thunderbolt Apache Leader, in which you also have terrain, as opposed to the more abstract tactical diagram that you use in say, Hornet Leader carrier operations. So there's that tactical feel, you have terrain, and here it also works differently because you're moving in the terrain, of course, but also the enemy is, as opposed to before when you were controlling your Apache, your Thunderbolt, you were moving around and simply targeting units that were stationary on the board. So you're interacting in a more dynamic way, but you still have that tactical aspect, which is where really the game shines, but is not all that there is. It would be actually a pretty claustrophobic, and I would almost say not an extraordinary system if that was all that there was. What is great is how the air leader system, and now this implementation of land warfare Tiger Leader actually manages to do when putting that tactical confrontation within the larger frame of a conflict in which managing resources is the biggest challenge, in which you have to manage a limited amount of resources over a protected amount of time and through a sequence of challenges. So those SO points that you can spend in various ways will never be enough. You will always want to have just a couple more. And I haven't even mentioned all the things that you can spend those for. Which means all the things that you will want to do and not necessarily will be able to do. Or you'll do those things, spending those points, and you'll regret it later. Really, to me, what makes the system so fantastic, so phenomenal, is precisely this double, the two sides of the coin. They're both represented in interesting ways, and especially from the sum of the two, you have something which is much more than the simple sum of the two. You have rich nuance, deep experience, with a great narrative, with a virtually RPG thematic intensity. You get to know the people that you're leading to battle, you get to know your units, you get to know your commanders, in this case, as you upgrade them, as they become stressed and they are on the brink of almost becoming unfit for command, and then you leave them, you give them some time to rest, you spend points, you see them on the other hand maybe being able to control their stress and advancing their career, gaining new skills. It's really exciting. Now, this being said, the game has a lot of all the things that I like in the other games. This is not, however, my favorite implementation in the leader system. That distinction still goes to Thunderbolt Apache Leader. This is a system that was never meant to be too detailed, never meant to be a simulation by any means. It was meant to give you a general sense of the challenges that a group of military units may face at the tactical and at the operational level. But it was always the system based on a compromise between streamlined gameplay, intuitive gameplay, ease and accessibility of gameplay, and on the other hand, some thematic element, both thematic in the sense of mirroring history and thematic in the sense of being narrative. So of these three elements, if you want, only one was strictly historical, the thematic historical. The thematic narrative is great, but is not specific of history. You may have a fantasy game with a great narrative, sci-fi, great narrative. And when players of war games are playing a game about historical events, they want to see at least some of that. They want to see that historical element, and the mileage to which people may travel when it comes to compromising varies enormously. There are players that only play the hardest simulations because anything other than that seems too abstract, and players that are willing to let go a little bit more. I'm one of them. I'm happy with a game that is streamlined, accessible, fun to play, still tells me a story, and still gives me a sense of the historical event. In this game here, Tiger Leader, sometimes I'm scratching my hand and wondering if there have been things that have been compromised that maybe they shouldn't have. There are just a couple of things that work mechanically and do not seem to go all that well with the theme. It is a little strange to me to see rifle groups that are fighting against tanks at a distance, not even at range 0, and destroying them, which may happen. A rifle group doesn't have that hard of a time inflicting a hit. Now, of course, it needs to be a lucky hit, but still, a rifle group can take down a tank without any support. Now, there are a lot of other people that are better equipped, they have better stats and bonuses, but the rifle people can still do it. Another thing is the bonus for advancing. To me, that's very interesting mechanically, because if you didn't have that bonus for advancing, bonus of attacking when you're advancing, then you could just sit at the bottom of the board and wait for the opponents to come, and since if there wasn't that bonus, there will be a time where they move and they're attacking you, but maybe you found your nice area in your position, in your defensive positions, or simply because of the timing, you're able to hit them easily. The game would miss a dynamic element because the game pushes you, encourages you to move against the enemy and to inflict that damage, that hit, with the bonus of advancing before you sit down and the second wave of enemies destroys you. Before things go too bad, you're surrounded, bad stuff happens. Definitely there's an advantage in advancing, and you don't want to leave all of that to the opponent. This being said, strange situations do arise because of this, because maybe my opponent here, and here there is a little underneath, there is an X with protection, with fortification, with good cover. Now, I'm moving into that X, and I'm closer to my enemy, so I'm firing as I'm entering that hex. I get a bonus because I did it as I advanced. Fine, perfectly fine. But then later, as the opponent advances towards me, the strange thing is that now the opponent is closer to me, and so they get the bonus for advance, and I'm sitting there in my fortification, and there is no direct advantage that I have from it. It just feels strange that you're rewarded for entering a fortification, but then just sitting there when you should have even better defensive advantages doesn't help you all that much. And there are just situations where I can see that advancing if I am hitting an opponent, but if we're far from in two different sides of the board and we have long range or we can fire at each other, it just feels weird that I get the bonus only when I'm physically moving, and then when I'm sitting there, I don't get it anymore. It's strange. It's just a little strange thing. Something also that is not exactly a compromise, something probably many people will like, but I miss from the previous games in the system, is the limited number of weapons that you can use, of shots that you can fire. The previous games were about airplanes, and so you had to decide the weapons that you wanted to load on your aircraft. You couldn't just load an endless amount of weapons. Actually, you had to choose a careful balance between anti-aircraft, entire ground installation, bombs to bomb stuff, different kind of things that you had to load, and you had to take into account the distance that you were going to travel to reach the target. That is something that players not necessarily like, especially at the beginning, because it takes you a long time before you can figure out how to load your aircraft correctly. In many cases early on when you're learning the game, you spend a lot of time choosing that missile instead of that one, that bomb instead of that one, and then you show up on the target, you realize you have the wrong combination of things. Now your attack powers are simply not there anymore. It's completely useless for you to be there. You abort the mission. It's really sad. Here, you can just start the mission because you can just fire. You're always firing the same weapon, whatever that weapon it is. It's not really, you don't have any maneuverability around there. Rifle, it makes sense. A rifle squad always fights with rifles. Anti-tanks, always with anti-tanks. Anti-tank weapons, I don't know. The point is that they really... to me, that actually detracts something from the experience. It is not a fault of the design, it's just the theme that would not allow different handling of the weapon system. But I just find that the system, while enjoyable here, lacks that further challenge that I definitely had and I definitely enjoyed in the air system game. There's the air title games of this system. So something that people will like, so because at the beginning you learn how you move, you learn how the enemies move and how they attack, and boom, you just go. You don't have to worry about that step, but I definitely like the challenge that I had there, and I don't have it here. Other than this, the game has a lot of good things about it. Mind you, I mean, the fact that the enemies do move, that is great. The enemies move in overall only partially predictable ways, based on modifiers, on their tactical role. You may kind of get a sense of where they're likely likely to go, but you still have an AI which does a decent job of surprising you and throwing you in bad, annoying situations that you did not expect. The fights are still, for the most part, fun and engaging. The events are interesting. The challenge that comes from budgeting resources during the campaign is the same that you had before. It has been tested for many games. It worked there. It still works here. I definitely enjoyed that. So, don't get me wrong, I pointed some negatives in this game, but I think it's a perfectly fine game. Actually, I would rather prefer this game to play this game most than many other games in my collection. I can play this one almost any day of the year and be happy. This is a fun, exciting game with a lot of theme, with a lot of fun situations, tough decisions, challenges, a campaign that you can play in a reasonable amount of time, an evening, maybe two. You do not need to set aside a month just to play Poland or France or North Africa. So it's a really, really good game. But as I played, since I spent so much time in the past playing the other games in the system and I like them so much, I just can't help it to compare mentally, and I can't help but thinking that the other games just are superior to this one in many departments. To try to explain what I mean here is like The Godfather Part 3. It's a perfectly good movie. It's a solid, entertaining movie. The character, the plot, the acting for the most part, great stuff. The Godfather Part 3 is a really good movie. But it just so happens that it comes after The Godfather Part 1 and Part 2, which are so incredible, which are masterpieces. The Godfather Part 3 is a good movie, just does not, it just end up looking like the ugly duckling in the family because everybody else in that family is so amazing. Tiger Leader is a really good game. To me, it is not just as good as Thunder Leader and Apache Leader, Phantom Leader, Hornet Leader, Key Operations. I enjoyed all of those more than I did this one. For now, the series has been going up, and it peaked with Thunderbolt Apache Leader. This is a little bit of a detour, a little bit of a break. The theme, however, may be of great interest, and I'm sure that there will be many gamers that will be happy to experience World War II fighting with some compromises here and there, and not having maybe the same type of experience that you would have from other games in the system. But if you like the system, this is a fine addition to have. It is still different enough from the other ones that it definitely has a spot in the collection of a wargamer. It is a game that I could play before I play many other games, but not a game that I play. Thunderbolt Apache Leader or Hornet Leader Killer Operations are available. That was too harsh. Maybe I played the other games a lot recently, played a lot of games with that theme. I need a different theme, I need a different experience, change of pace. Then Tiger Leader would be a perfectly good option.